Alright, now that we have learned to use the line weight toggle here, again remember, if you're down here, I think you can turn anything on and off by just clicking with the left click on the mouse. So you can turn the polar on and off, and if you want to change the way they look, you can change by doing the settings, and that's the right click, settings, display, use icons or not. So right click, turn on the not use icons. I said before we'll come back to snap, but as a real quick introduction here, I'm going to turn the snap on and the grid on at once, and you see what happens here. On my screen, this actually just makes something that's 12 by 12 or 9 by 12, which always is kind of an odd thing when you think about it, because you're thinking about the space being an infinitely infinite. You can change this by changing a command called limits, and I'll just explain or show what that looks like. Limits from 0, 0 to 100, 100, and you see how it changes that snap and grid. What you don't want to get caught doing is turning off the snap without the grid or the grid without the snap. You want them both to be on and off at the same time. That's why you hold the F7 and the F. At home that doesn't work, sorry. So because of one of the F7 and F9 keys is mapped for this recording function. So you turn them both off at once. Alright. So we'll see that becomes important later when you're doing schematics. But you want to remember that these are all again set by shift right click, object snap settings, and you've got snap and grid. You would like them also to be about the same. You see here the grid and the snap is a little bit different. They're the same right now. You wouldn't like to have one snapped and not the other one. There's lots of other adaptive behavior you can do, again realizing that there are settings for snap and grid. Right. Ortho. You've already stumbled upon Ortho, and Ortho is a good one to know the toggle for, which is the F8. So I'll show you how the Ortho works. I'm going to draft a line here. And now you see my mouse will go in any direction. But if I turn on the Ortho by either hitting F8 or clicking down here, now as I move my mouse, it's going to kind of assume you either want to go straight up or straight over in the kind of orthographic directions. And it gives you this input here, even though at this point your dynamic is not on. Which is kind of a nice thing, because what you can do in this case is you can kind of take your mouse in the general direction and then just type a distance. So I'll type 15, and it drafted that line 15 up. I take my hand off the mouse to do this. I move my mouse in the general direction, and I can say 10. I'm just keying in 10, and it takes me up 10. My mouse in the general direction, I'm moving my mouse in the general direction. Some of you will need to take your hand off the mouse before you type in again. I would recommend you start doing that. I want to go 15, and you kind of get the general drift here. 10, 3, 4, 10, and now even if I now say shift right click to the end point, it actually will supersede the object snap, the ortho snap. So that is the ortho mode. Okay, I'm turning that off now, and I can turn on the polar mode. But again, shift right click, object snap settings, polar tracking. I can show you with polar tracking on, we get the same bit even without the ortho, because now it's at 90 degrees. I wheeled out. Now if I do here, it kind of wants to go at that polar tracking, so I can go 10, I can go 5, and I'm just moving my mouse in the general direction, 10, and I can go down to the shift right click, or I can just go this way. I can go up and down. You realize that you have to get your mouse generally close in this case. If you're right here, it doesn't grab like it does in ortho. It's got to be relatively close to grab that polar. All right. So really, polar is a great snap to use, but more so if you've got something where you're going to kind of want to have particular angles. So I'm going to erase everything here by left-clicking going across, right-clicking in the right black space and clicking erase. Now I'm going to shift right-click, go to Object Snap Settings, go to Polar Tracking and change it so my incremental angle is 45. And now you'll notice as I go here, I click. If I get close to here and type 10, it gets close to the 0 angle. If I get close to here, if I get close to 45, I can type 10. If I get close to 90 or 135, I can type 10. If it gets close anywhere in a 45 increment, 10. And same thing, I can get close here, 10. All right, so it's grabbing a particular increment. There's all kinds of ramifications of that, but let me go ahead, right mouse. I took a sweep across, right mouse click, erase. One of the great ramifications of that, shift, right click, Object Snap Settings, Polar Tracking. You might want to have an angle that is 11.25. Sorry. And eventually you may see, right now, so if I go here, click, click, now I get 11 close, maybe that's going to be 8, and get kind of close, 8. And you notice what it's doing here, it jumped a couple here, so I'm going to, it's jumping up, and it's increments off of, in this case it's not incrementing at 11.25, it's just giving me that one angle. So it went up to 45 here. These angles that you're talking off of are off of the standard position angle. So in this case it only took that 11.25. I'll show you again. Here, now it'll grab 11.25, I'm going to say 8. It won't grab 22.5, or it only grabs at 45. So that's a little different than it actually changing the incremental of the angle. You go shift right click your Object Snap Settings, go to Polar Tracking. You can also do relative to last segment, absolute or relative to last segment. And that, of course, as you start worrying about turned angles, that would be one other way to do the turned angle thing. So I'm going to try that setting, erase everything. Now as I go ahead, now that 11.25, 8, it's tracking 8, 8. I'm saying 8 as I track 8. And that may seem weird and arbitrary, but very often when you're designing water pipe, 11.25 is a fitting, actually, standard fitting for very large pipes. Or you may be only able to bend a pipe at an easy joint by a certain number of degrees. So those of you who are worrying about working with hard cast fittings, that's a pretty useful set of snaps. All right, object snap we already know. We'll skip over object track. I'm going to go to the dynamic settings real quick here. Turning it on and off obviously there, but I'm going to hold you shift right click. Object snap settings, take you to the dynamic input, and what I want you to see is the settings here. They're either going to be default to polar or Cartesian, and then relative or absolute. So I've got mine set up to Cartesian default and absolute. In other words, if I key in with the input, it's going to give me change in X, change in Y, and then absolute, which doesn't necessarily make a lot of sense. I might really want to have it Cartesian and relative, and then some other stuff here. So I'm going to do a quick one of that. So it's Cartesian and relative. If I go here, click. Now when I go here and with the dynamic on, you notice it's giving me the next point. I'm going to say 10, tab 10. It gave me 10 over. Now I'm going to say 5, tab 10. And you notice what it's doing. It is actually taking the input. Last thing I'm going to do is shift right click, object snap settings. The other thing to learn about dynamic input is even more important, and that is how you do these here. So we'll pick that up. That will be the last of our kind of settings things. Mostly it's to play around and play with them and realize that you got to set them to use them. We'll see you in a minute.